After the flood we have the record of the patriarchs. This includes Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Later came judges and kings. Can these arrangements be considered to be organizations? And, in particular, could these be said to be God's organizations here on earth? The aim of this discussion will be to show that the organizational structure did change over time, from being purely family arrangements to a national arrangement with various forms of leadership. Later even the purpose changed. The thing that they all had in common was the ultimate head of the organization being God. First of all, remember the meaning of the word organization. Do these men fit that meaning? What was their purpose? No doubt you will come to your own conclusion. I am not presenting this to try to win an argument or convince you that we are correct. It is so that you can better understand why, and what, we believe. This is not an in-depth discussion of all aspects touched on here, it is an overview of the topics.
In your opinion, what was the purpose of the biblical record of the patriarchs?
The purpose of these patriarchs is as mentioned in the Bible, and is in line with what is recorded at Genesis 3:15.
And I will put enmity between you and the woman and between your offspring and her offspring. He will crush your head, and you will strike him in the heel.
Here, just after Satan had caused a problem to God's purpose for mankind, by getting Adam and Eve to disobey God and fall short of God's standards, in other words sin, God has started to outline a remedy to set matters straight again. That remedy was a seed, or an heir, or offspring, that would eventually crush and destroy the great adversary.
How does that relate to the patriarchs?
Remember Abraham, because of his righteousness, he was chosen by God to become the forefather of the seed mentioned back in Genesis 3:15. We know this from what is recorded at Genesis 12 verses 1 to 3.
And Jehovah said to Abram, Go out from your land and away from your relatives and from the house of your father to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will become a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who calls down evil on you, and all the families of the ground will certainly be blessed by means of you. And by means of your seed all nations of the earth will certainly bless themselves due to the fact that you have listened to my voice.
The line of the seed was to continue through Isaac, as we are told at Genesis 26 verses 3 to 6.
Reside as an alien in this land, and I shall continue with you and bless you, because to you and to your seed I shall give all these lands, and I will carry out the sworn statement that I swore to Abraham your father. And I will multiply your seed like the stars of the heavens, and I will give to your seed all these lands, and by means of your seed all nations of the earth will certainly bless themselves, due to the fact that Abraham listened to my voice and continued to keep his obligations to me, my commands, my statutes, and my laws.
This promised seed by which all the nations would be blessed was to be Jesus. Paul, in writing to the first-century congregation of Christians in Galatia said,
This was so that the blessing of Abraham would come to the nations by means of Christ Jesus.
The family households of these patriarchs were not small like today's families. Abraham, for example, had a substantial household of immediate family, herds, and herdsmen. Abraham's household included 380 men, slaves, born into his household, who were trained enough to act like a small army. Through the time of the patriarchs we do not learn a great deal, but we do learn that they were organized with the patriarch taking the lead. These households worked in partnership with God to protect a common purpose or goal, and that was the lineage of the promised seeds that God would use as a legal means of restoring mankind back to his original purpose of one human family, united under one God. By the time of Moses, things had somewhat changed. When the Israelites and the vast mixed company came out of Egypt, they had become a nation, and needed a different organizational structure. At the start, Moses was their go-between or mediator, between God and the nation of Israel. Aaron, his brother, acted as his spokesperson at times. For a while, Moses took it upon himself to have sole control over the affairs of this nation. This responsibility was too much for him. In Exodus chapter 18, we learn that the father-in-law of Moses urges him to appoint responsible men to help in managing the people. Later he was urged by his father-in-law to appoint chieftains to help solve problems. A priesthood was established to look after the spiritual needs of the people and to offer the needed sacrifices. Moses was still their leader, but now there was an order of doing things, priests and chieftains, to use our language, an organization. Moses had led the people for 40 years, and when he died, Joshua was given the responsibility to lead the people into the promised land. Sometime after his death, judges were appointed to judge the affairs of the people and often lead them into battle against those that would attack them. These judges started with Othniel, and extended until Samuel the prophet. Samuel is not usually counted among the judges. The period of the judges extended about 300 years. The judges were selected and appointed by Jehovah from various tribes of Israel. They acted as his representatives. Their responsibility included judging the people in difficult matters, reminding them that they were God's chosen nation, and defending the nation, as well as the lineage for the promised seed, from the neighboring nations that wanted to plunder them.
So Jehovah would raise up judges who would save them from the hand of their plunderers.
Between Joshua and Samuel, 12 judges are named in the Bible. At the time of Samuel the prophet, the people wanted a king, just like the nations around them had, so now a new era began. The role of the king was that they were supposed to be God's royal agents. When they sat on the throne, it was not to be viewed as their own throne. They were to be representatives of God's theocratic rule.
And of all my sons, for Jehovah has given me many sons, he chose my son Solomon to sit on the throne of the kingship of Jehovah over Israel. And Solomon sat on Jehovah's throne as king in place of David his father, and he was successful, and all the Israelites were obedient to him.
By the time of the promised seed, Jesus was born. The people of Israel and Judah became a rebellious nation who did not stay by God's laws and commands. Over the centuries they had various punishments issued against them, but in vain they did not learn. The nation of Israel had the first opportunity to be part of the kingdom, or government arrangement, that would again bring peace to the earth. After 3.5 years of ministry, we find this condemnation of the nation.
Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the killer of the prophets and stoner of those sent to her, how often I wanted to gather your children together the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you did not want it. Look, your house is abandoned to you.
Sometime after the death of Jesus, there was a meeting in Jerusalem over a problem that had arisen, about if the Gentile men that had become followers of Jesus should be circumcised. Part of the evidence given at that time was that God was now showing favor to a different group of people. We find this recorded by Luke.
At that the entire group became silent, and they began to listen to Barnabas and Paul relate the many signs and wonders that God had done through them among the nations. After they finished speaking, James replied, Men, brothers, hear me. Simeon has related thoroughly how God for the first time turned his attention to the nations to take out of them a people for his name.
Through the work that was spearheaded by Paul, the good news of God's kingdom via his son Jesus, many people from various non-Jewish nations had believed in the work that Jesus had done. A new nation was born. A spiritual nation.
How was this a spiritual nation?
In the past, to show a difference to other nations, all men that were born as an Israelite, or men that wanted to join the Israelite nation, had to be circumcised in the flesh. This was no longer to be a requirement to be part of God's new nation. Instead, a new circumcision was required, and it was to be effective on all that wanted to be part of this new nation. In writing to the Romans, Paul said,
For he is not a Jew who is one on the outside, nor is circumcision something on the outside, on the flesh. But he is a Jew who is one on the inside, and his circumcision is that of the heart by spirit and not by a written code. That person's praise comes from God, not from people.
In Paul's letter to the Galatians we will read an expression that only occurs once in the Bible and is very important here.
For neither is circumcision anything nor is uncircumcision, but a new creation is. As for all those who walk orderly by this rule of conduct, peace and mercy be upon them, yes, upon the Israel of God.
Here we are told that there is a new creation that is not dependent on circumcision as was Israel, and it is now called the Israel of God. This Israel of God is referring to the newly established Christian congregation. This new arrangement had Jesus as the head of the congregation, working under the authority of his God and Father. Appointed men were given the responsibility of oversight. They were to be like shepherds that look after flocks of sheep for a master. Scriptural qualifications for such men can be found in 1 Timothy chapter 3, and Titus chapter 1.
So far, you have told us that the common goal that made these patriarchs and the nation of Israel as God's organization was to protect the lineage leading to the seed. This promised seed that you spoke about had come and gone with the appearance of Jesus. So, what was the common goal that this new organization had?
Just before Jesus died, he gave his apostles a composite sign that would mark the conclusion of this system that is under the rulership of the god of this world, Satan. Part of that sign was that the good news of God's kingdom would be preached in all the earth. That command was given by Jesus as recorded at Matthew 24:14. And, after his death, not long before his ascension to heaven, he gave this command to all his disciples that were gathered.
Go, therefore, and make disciples of people of all the nations, teaching them to observe all the things I have commanded you. And look, I am with you all the days until the conclusion of the system of things.
Did you notice the command there? Go. Part of that command was teaching them to observe all the things I have commanded you. What forms part of all the things I have commanded you? Why, is it not the command, go and make disciples? So, now we have the new commission for the Israel of God. The purpose is to preach the good news of God's kingdom, to make disciples, and teach these disciples to do the same thing, that is, go preach, and make disciples. This new nation came out of the old nation of Israel. The old nation of Israel was once God's chosen people. As a nation, not as individuals, Israel was abandoned, and a new nation with a new mediator was contracted to do God's will. Jesus as the mediator between God and man.
No one comes to the Father except through me.
Jesus is the mediator of the new covenant between God and the new spiritual nation of Israel. Jesus tells us what the purpose of this new covenant is for.
And I make a covenant with you, just as my Father has made a covenant with me, for a kingdom, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. Have no fear, little flock, for your Father has approved of giving you the kingdom. If we go on enduring, we will also rule together as kings. If we deny, he will also deny us. Therefore, seeing that we are to receive a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us continue to receive undeserved kindness, through which we may acceptably offer God sacred service with godly fear and awe. Listen, my beloved brothers. Did not God choose those who are poor from the world's standpoint to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he promised to those who love him? And he made us to be a kingdom, priests to his God and Father. Yes, to him be the glory and the might forever. Amen. But they will be priests of God and of the Christ, and they will rule as kings with him for the 1,000 years.
Anyone with any sense would understand that the ancient nation of Israel had priests and kings. We also know that the vast majority of the nation were just people that the kings and priests administered over. So, who were the people that these kings and priests that were to be given the kingdom, along with Jesus, going to rule over?
Think back to our discussion in Video 3 about God's purpose for the earth. That purpose has not changed. Isaiah writes about this at Isaiah 45 verse 18.
It says, "The Creator of the heavens, the true God, the one who formed the earth, its maker who firmly established it, who did not create it simply for nothing, but formed it to be inhabited.
Jesus confirms that in his famous Sermon on the Mount.
Happy are the mild-tempered, since they will inherit the earth.
The Apostle John sees a vision of future times and writes,
With that I heard a loud voice from the throne say, Look! The tent of God is with mankind, and he will reside with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them. And he will wipe out every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more, neither will mourning nor outcry nor pain be any more. The former things have passed away.
Obviously I haven't been able to give all relevant details and proof texts. If you have questions, please ask the next one of Jehovah's Witnesses that calls at your door, or go to jw.org. In the past, God only used one organized group of people at a time to accomplish his purposes. In the next video I will start to look at why we understand that God still uses only one organized group of people today, and why that one group are the people known as Jehovah's Witnesses.